Welcome to Windows on the World, and tonight we're going to be having a look at history, quite recent history, and we can learn so much from the recent past. We can learn most of what we need to know from those who warned us in the past. So we're going to be talking over the next few months about voices from the past, voices of reason with keen insight and knowledge, most of all, those voices which we need to hear now and which should not be forgotten. They warned us of what is now taking place. Britain, England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, all under one system. Yes, the global system. All those in the past who spoke reasonably and sincerely were defamed or simply erased from history by the infiltrators themselves. A lot can be learned and put into perspective just with a bit of searching. Often one thing links to another, and a door opens to the past which is relevant now. Not much coverage of important historical figures now, especially those who saw what was coming. Well, of course, the Enlightenment was the tool for imposing the mundane on the majority. Now feelings matter, facts do not. The appeal to emotion and offering a simple solution is the easiest way to manipulate. Well, ask any guru of any cult. The Brotherhood of the Snake, or Serpent Illuminated, through Kabbalistic nonsense, have been discussed in many shows, especially last week. The Elected Priesthood of the Universe, the last one in the archive. The Ellis Cohen, the Martinists, these Illuminati groups infiltrated everything, and they were all supported by those who were part of the Enlightenment. The European and Asiatic aristocracy played the biggest part, along with their Kabbalistic brethren, the Sabbateans, who have successfully infiltrated more than most could possibly imagine or even know about. Hidden from view, but their work is in plain sight nevertheless. The so-called Enlightenment was just the opposite, an avenue into the mundane for the masses. To quote one of the most preposterous, Charles Darwin, let's have a quote from him, which brings things into the present. Species that adapt to their environment are more likely to survive and pass on traits to their offspring. Well, actually, it would be more accurate to say those that conform to mainstream beliefs are supported and promoted within the system. That is real Darwinism, social Darwinism. Idiots survive and get promoted because they are useful. Giraffes that have longer necks get more food, says Darwin. The most debunked and daft theories, of course, still survive. Survival of the useful, not of the fittest. Steering mechanisms survive. Charles Fort, archivist and writer. Let's have a quote from him. Almost all people are hypnotics. The proper authority saw to it that the proper belief should be induced, and the people believed properly. All would be well, all would be heavenly, if the damned would only stay damned. Debunked theories all survive when useful. It is indeed survival of the useful. The climate apocalypse cult has survived and gets stronger by repetition, but never through fact. Get off the planet and stop breathing for Gaia. It's such a clever con. Depopulate for the common good, induce guilt and self-hatred. Be guilty of being born. It's taken a while, but it has never accelerated more than at this moment, though it has been building up pretty quickly over the last 30 years. Those that warned us about an age of enslavement and slavery, the likes of which had never been seen before, were actually right. Now the terminology is simple and, of course, stupid. Just describe them as far right or fascist, terms which have now been stripped of all of their previous meaning, merely weapons of war. Figures of hate are easy to create out of nothing. The terminology is dumb, but the protagonists know that those who repeat and believe it are now even dumber. Hate crime, a brilliant word weapon. Well, Darwin and his quotes have been a big part of the control and depopulation plan. Let's have another one. More organisms are produced than can survive because of limited resources. Of course, that's similar to Thomas Malthus. His ideas and quotes. Let's have a look at one. The supply of food cannot keep up with the growth of the human population, inevitably resulting in disease, famine, war and calamity. Well, actually, the disease, famine, war and calamity are all created. You forgot climate change, though. Well, something as simple as this had to come later, of course, when technology controlled reality through computer models. Nothing new then. All this was the backstory for sustainable development, or the control and rationing of all resources promoted through the biggest lie in history ever, the climate crisis. Well, the Club of Rome, the globalist steering group, updated it with its publication Limits to Growth, and then, of course, the first global revolution. The revolution is never you, of course. It is always them. This was about getting mankind to be seen as the enemy of itself. Depopulation, all under the global cult of Gaia. Create a common enemy and offer the solution. This, of course, is the trick of every fake guru and cult leader. Create the fear and force the solution. Steal the assets for the predator class, control and manage the cattle through very simple control mechanisms. Conform through enforced rationing and poverty. Divide them relentlessly through distractions of no importance. Fake protest, pointless debates, circuses of sport, game shows, soap operas. And of course then we have the educated dupes who are on television screens constantly, like Christopher and Peter Hitchens. Yes, both of them have been used in the past for the allowed voice of fake distraction and opposition. Of course, there's Richard Dawkins, David Attenborough, all the other promoted voices of distraction and control. And the top political commentators for the past year include paid puppets for all accepted sides. Rachel Maddow, Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro, Laura Ingraham, Jake Tapper, Bill O'Reilly, Candace Owen. Have you had enough yet? I know I have. Then for the real intellectuals, we have Greta, the biggest joke that has been played on the public in living memory. This was without doubt the litmus test for terminal and hopeless stupidity. And it worked, of course, on its target audience. The slightly affluent were always the target. Now they are wiping themselves out. Guilt and self-hatred induced for just being here. Have you heard all this before? Good. I think we've mentioned it, haven't we? Let's move on. I'd like to introduce in this show one of those, and of course in future shows a few of those, who had long ago learned of what was to come. We've had a few of these in the past in the shows, of course we have. We've had the man who saw the future, George Hunt. We've had Dr. Richard Day from 1969. Well, you can find those articles. Take a look at The Fourth World. It's on the homepage at windowsontheworld.net. Look at the man who saw the future for a full exposition of what's in that show. And then you can also look at Dr. Richard Day, The New Barbarians. All on the homepage, windowsontheworld.net. You can download stuff on the free books page. Vast amount of important information there. So yeah, we've had a few of these in the past, but I think it's time for a few more over the coming months. There has recently been focus on Ireland, quite rightly so. The forefront now of full-on psychological war and gaslighting of the population. So, with that in mind, let's look at an insightful and influential figure from the recent past in Ireland. George Noble Plunkett, or also known as Count Plunkett, was born on the 3rd of December 1851, died the 12th of March 1948. He was an Irish nationalist and father of Joseph Mary Plunkett, one of the leaders of the Easter Rising of 1916. Let's have a brief potted history. George Noble Plunkett was born in Dublin. He was educated at Clongowes Wood College. Plunkett spent much time abroad, notably studying in Nice, France, and of course throughout Italy, as people who have heard of him will know. From 1872 he was at Dublin University, where his generous allowance let him study Renaissance and medieval art. He enrolled at the King's Inns in 1870 and then the Middle Temple in 1874, but was not called to the bar until 1886, very educated chap. While there he befriended Oscar Wilde and Jeremiah O'Donovan Rosser. In 1877 He got a university gold medal for Irish speakers and published a book of poems, God's Chosen Festival. And the following year he issued a pamphlet, The Early Life of Henry Grattan. In 1884 he was created a papal count by Pope Leo XIII for his building work for the papacy and Rome. Plunkett was called to the Irish bar in 1886 where he served. 1907 to 1916 he was curator of the National Museum in Dublin. He also wrote articles for magazines, editing a short-lived one, Hibernia, for 18 months from 1882 onwards. In 1883 he donated funds and property to the Nursing Order of the Little Company of Mary, also known as the Blue Sisters, and on the 4th of April 1884, yes, as we know, he became a count. His interest in politics most likely came from his sons Joseph, George and John, but it was following the execution of Joseph that he became radicalised. It is likely that Joseph swore him into the Irish Republican Brotherhood sometime before he was shot. Plunkett travelled to Germany with communiques for Roger Casement. He was expelled from the Royal Dublin Society for his son's role in the Easter Rising. After the Rising he was deported and imprisoned in Reading Jail, where he remained until shortly before his election on an abstentionist platform in the North Roscommon by-election of February 1917. Although an Irish nationalist, Plunkett had supported Charles Stewart Parnell. He worked against the Union and was sole nationalist candidate for Dublin. That was the Irish Party who won the seat in 1900. He had edited Charles O'Kelly's memoir about the Jacobite War in Ireland. O'Kelly had been dedicated to the establishment of an independent democratic republic in Ireland between 1858 and 1924. After the Easter Uprising on Easter Monday 1916, Irish nationalists launched an armed revolt against British rule in Ireland. Although quickly suppressed by the British Army, the Rising was a seminal moment in modern Irish history, and it helped to pave the way for the nation's independence in 1922. After its defeat, Plunkett was sacked from his post at the National Museum of Ireland and deported with the Countess, his wife, to Oxford the following January, and that was when he was expelled by the Royal Dublin Society as well, or deplatformed as they call it today. This earned him nomination as the surviving Rebels candidate in the Roscommon North by-election. He returned to Ireland illegally on the 31st of January 1917 and won the seat 3 days later. I don't think you could do that now, could you? Pledging abstention from attendance at Westminster in accordance with Sinn Féin policy, he initiated a Republican Liberty League and affiliated itself with Sinn Féin. In October, this front became the new Sinn Féin, committed to Plunkett's Republic rather than to the King, Lords and the Commons. In the Civil War, even though he was now interned, the Republicans appointed him to their Council of State. In the August 1923 general election, Plunkett topped the poll in County Roscommon. Imagine having that influence from inside a jail. He was released in December. This is all from the Irish Press, by the way, 15th of March 1948. I've been doing a bit of digging here. It's all common knowledge. I think it's probably much more common knowledge to people in Ireland, though. And I had heard of this fella before, but I just discovered some of the things that he knew about, and I thought it was so relevant for today. That's why we're having this show all about him. It was said that he was more used to addressing members of a learned society, though, than the rough and tumble of the hustings, more of an intellectual, really. Theoretically and practically, he was stated to be more of a scholar than a politician. Well, can you imagine that these days? No, you can't. He wasn't a change agent. He unfortunately died from cancer on the 12th of March 1948, and he's buried at Glasnevin Cemetery. Now, I'm going to have a very short break, and after the break, we're going to come back with the real information about the Count. So I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Windows on the World. Most interestingly, Plunkett was concerned with the infiltration by Kabbalists and Sabbatean Frankists. During July 1921, Count George Noble Plunkett, then Dáil Minister for Foreign Affairs, wrote a long letter to Eamon de Valera. In case you don't know, de Valera was a commandant of Irish volunteers at Bollins Mill during the 1916 Easter Rising. He was a political force in Irish politics. He was arrested and sentenced to death, but released for a variety of reasons, including his American citizenship and the public response to the British execution of the uprising's leaders. He returned to Ireland after being jailed in England and became one of the leading political figures of the War of Independence. After the signing of the Anglo-Irish Treaty, de Valera served as the political leader of Sinn Féin until 1926, when he, along with many supporters, left the party to set up Fianna Fáil. Well, Valera had close ties with the Irish Jewish community and its chief rabbi. It was in a letter to Valera that Plunkett warned that Republicans should be wary of too close a relationship with certain of those under the broad banner of Judaism. It did not mean all Jews, or indeed most Jews. This is where the terminology, of course, becomes weaponized and falls into the hands of those who control the terminology. The Easter Rising in 1916 had made a tremendous impression on a second-generation Irish Jew named Robert Briscoe. Briscoe actually met anti-Semitism from pro-treaty Irishmen, and on election for Dublin South as a Judeo-Bolshevik, that's what they called him, and an alien ruffian. He wasn't very popular. But in the 1930s, accusations were made by elements of the French press that Briscoe had operated as an agent for the American investment bank Kuhn Loeb. Of course, they were financiers of many uprisings, while others insinuated that he had instigated the assassination of Michael Collins. Well, all this is known. However, Plunkett was right about the infiltration and what was going on. Frankist families had infiltrated Ireland since the 1700s, some becoming outwardly Catholic, some outwardly Protestant. For instance, here's a few names of those who were Sabbatean Frankists. Daniel Murray, Archbishop of Dublin, Frankist Bishop Michael O'Connor, real name Kinnaugh of Ballarant, Frankist Cardinal Paul Cullen, real name Cohen of Dublin, and Cullen's father was the son of Rabbi Isaac Fulda of Hamburg, and another daughter of Joseph Mayer and Hannah Rothschild, who was the daughter of Hertz Moses Rothschild and Hannah Halberstadt. They were all related. So this is the same family. Archbishop Daniel Murphy of Tasmania was the grandson of Peter Murpergo, or Murphy, through Peter's son Michael Murphy, who married Miriam Schwenk, or Schwalinsky, also known as Mary McSweeney. So here we can see the names and how they interbred and the changing of the names. This is how the Frankists, the Sabbatean Frankists, who we've talked a lot about recently, infiltrated Ireland. So we also had the Frankist Cardinal Edward McCabe, or Maccabee of Ireland. Patrick Moran, the grandson of Jacob Frank, had a brother James Moran of Liverpool, and James' Hebrew name was Jacob in honour of his grandfather. Yes, this is very interesting. I was given a lot of information about the Frankist infiltration of Ireland several weeks ago, and this, I hope, is tying some of it together. Well, the name Moran means teacher in Hebrew. Moreno or Moranu means our teacher, and is usually a title given to a Jewish Rebbe or Zadik. So this is Patrick Moran, the grandson of Jacob Frank, whose brother James lived in Liverpool. James was the grandson of Jacob Frank, who was known as Hamorenu Jacob Frank to many of his followers. James was the leader and teacher of a group of Zoharists, Kabbalists basically, in Liverpool. He married a Mexican Marrano girl who was a gifted healer and midwife among the crypto-Jewish and Frankist communities. In accord with Frankist tradition, James taught his daughter Helena, as well as his son, to read, write and study. So the auburn hair found in his descendants is believed to have come via his mother, Eva Rivlin. James was born in Europe in 1778, the son of a Jewish rabbi who was the son of Jacob Frank. He was trained as a Frankist Rebbe and led a group of Frankists in Liverpool. He also lived with his daughter Helen in Athlone Island and his son Simon in Wicklow Island. His grandson Patrick Moran became the Catholic bishop in South Africa and New Zealand. Well, the first wave of European Frankists had actually come to Ireland in 1761 after the arrest and imprisonment of Jacob Frank in Chestochua in late 1760. Many of them were members of Frank's family. They mixed with the already crypto-Jewish community of Ireland, so a very big infiltration of Ireland by Sabbatean Frankists. And of course, they integrated and became priests, as we have just gone into. It is only with this Frankist conversion that these crypto-Jewish families became truly Catholic. The Frankist families took Irish names and identity. Let's have a look at some more of the names now. Murray was from Mazinski, Cullen from Cohen, Murphy from Mopergo, O'Connor from Connor, Kinor or Konarski, Kinsella, Kaplinsky, Mayer, different spelling of course, became M-A-H-E-R rather than M-A-Y-E-R. Doyle came from D'Oliveira, McCabe from Maccabee, Lynch from Luntz, Flood from Folder, Brennan from Brainan, Lavine from Zaslavsky, Carroll from Carlin, Nolan from Nolen, Neil from Nellens, and Walsh from Woloski. So many of them. Jacob Frank had led 60,000 European Jews around 1760 into baptism in the Catholic Church. A much greater number of his followers did not take this step and remained in their Jewish communities. Among the non-baptized group were those who relapsed into Sabbatean teachings, and of course the people who had changed their names also did this, and those such as Rebbe Nachman of Breslov and other Hasidim who continued in the Tikkun taught by Jacob Frank, and also the Catholic converted Nathan of Gaza, a major Kabbalist, very important name in the history of Kabbalah. The baptized Catholic Frankists were split into two major groups, those under Eva Frank, who united with the Prague Sabbateans, and those who followed the other daughters of Jacob Frank from his first marriage, whose leadership became based in Italy, Spain and Ireland, and they became a leaven in the Catholic Church for a Rome-focused mystical, liturgical and devotional renewal of Catholicism. Can you see now how this has happened so strongly in Ireland, how Catholicism became such a strong force in Ireland, and also the intense focus on Marianism? It all came from the Frankists. Beginning in about 1790, some of the non-baptized Hasidim, the secret Frankists, joined the Catholic devotional Frankists in the Catholic Church, and there was a further influx in 1820 under the son of the Alter Rebbe, Rebbe Moshe Bel Zalman Leon, Moshe ben Leon. And these anti-Sabbatean Frankists or Zoharists can also be called papal Frankists. A secret war began in the Catholic Church between two groups, the Sabbatean Frankists, who were those who followed Frank's cousin, the Masonic and revolutionary Moses Drobushka, and Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Illuminati, and their opponents, the Catholic Zoharist Frankists, under the leadership of the Frankist Irish, Spanish and Italian bishops and cardinals, such as Cardinals Fransoni of Italy, Cullen of Ireland and Moran of Australia, all those we previously mentioned. Saint Pope Pius X was also from a Frankish Jewish family. Can you see now how the infiltration is so important and how the definition is absolutely essential in defining what we're talking about here? We are not talking about any religion. We're talking about an infiltration program which hides behind a religion. Well, many other members of these families also became priests and nuns. The women, whether mothers or nuns, were considered as having a powerful role in Frankist families. They were prominent in the Sisters of Mercy, the Sisters of Charity, and Presentation Sisters. They guarded the maternal lineage, assuring that their sons, brothers or nephews married women of Frankist families. Massive infiltration in Ireland there. This they did for at least 100 years after they became Catholics. In the late 1800s, it is said that this network started to totally assimilate or had full infiltration into the surrounding Catholic culture and practice. So when we look at Ireland and Catholicism, we have to know what we're talking about here. The papal Frankists who went to Ireland were to bring an intense Marian focus, and with them, under the papal Frankist priests, bishops, the nuns and laity, they inaugurated a new era of Marian fervour in Irish Catholicism. So all of this stuff about Mary came from Frankism. It's quite incredible, isn't it? And when you look at it, it starts to make much more sense as to how Ireland has been controlled in the recent past through Catholicism, now of course through globalism. So now you know where all that actually came from. Well, it was hidden. The Frankists were hidden in the Church of Europe that pushed for the dogmas of the Immaculate Conception and papal infallibility. So when we look at how the Vatican has controlled Ireland, we now know who was behind that. At the same time, the Masonic Sabbatean Frankists were working to oppose the agendas of the papal Frankists and were working for an occult, Masonic and modernist takeover of the structures of the Catholic Church. Well, of course, this is the cover story. I would strongly suggest that they were all working together. And Plunkett asserted that this cult had been a negative influence all across Europe. And this is what Count Plunkett said. 1. They are and will remain aliens in most countries. 2. Their codes of honour and morals are not Christian. 3. That in business and otherwise they act together throughout a country and even from one nation to another, at times like Freemasons. Well, he was absolutely right there, wasn't he? Because when we talk about Frankists, when we talk about Sabbateans, we also have to think of the Elis Cohen, the Martinists, the elected priesthood of the universe, the occult Masonic lodges of Europe. 4. He stated that a benefactor to their poor can influence their votes through their rabbi, or of course through the local Kehillah, which is the unofficial governing body of a group of Sabbateans, or less obviously through the Frankists and of course their false messiahs. 5, he said that as an Orangeman's religion is commonly hatred of the Pope, the debased Frankists, when they lose their faith, retain a racial antagonism to Christians. And this, of course, is how they infiltrated both sides, because, of course, the Protestant Church was completely taken over by the Frankists also, because then, of course, we have Christian Zionism. He went on to claim that this cult and the Freemasons were responsible for the Great War, that both now dominated France. Of course, he was right there. Just look at the last show in the archive. That's where the elected priesthood came from, the Grand Orient Lodge, of course. And many of the European Illuminati lodges were all French. And Plunkett said they were seeking to destroy the papacy. Well, destroy or take it over, re-represent it. How interesting is all that? Because now they are absolutely aligned, except for a surface opposition. That is, of course, the Catholic cult and the Freemasons. In Britain, Plunkett claimed the press was largely owned and controlled by the cult. Hence, its dealing with Irish affairs was abominable. Well, this is a great summation, of course, of how British Israel went on to become a global alliance, how nationalism was infiltrated, went into internationalism and then into globalism. He described the future globalist cult very well. He said it is corrupt through want of principle, no less than from an anxiety for profit. Plunkett had no hatred for those under the general banner of Jewry, of course, and indeed had friends and supporters who described themselves as under the banner of this term. His insight predicted the now complete infiltration and subversion of government. The end result in Ireland is now plain to see. What would this intellectual and reasonable Republican think of the deceitful puppet Varadkar? I'm sure he would be completely stunned into silence that it had been allowed to happen. Indeed, how could it have happened, and in such a relatively small time frame? Plunkett also pointed out how pornography was being used to degenerate the minds of Christians. He pointed out that the infiltration was about financial control and the control of the media, pointing out how Austria had already fallen into enemy hands as far as the press were concerned. Romanian politician Nicolae Iorga had warned Plunkett of how Romania had been infiltrated. Iorga lived from 1871 till 27th of November 1940. He was a Romanian historian and politician, a literary critic, a memoirist, poet and playwright, and co-founder in 1910 of the Democratic Nationalist Party. Iorga had given Plunkett a painful account of the state of slavery to which the cult had brought his countrymen. That's a direct quote there. Now, of course, the plan is well advanced. The Republican parties have been captured by the globalist cult. Politically, it seems there is no way to turn within the accepted three-party system, especially now, and we now know who is running all three, a globalist cult. It can only actually be reversed locally, which is why I thought the insights of Count Plunkett were so fascinating and relevant to what is going on in Ireland today. I linked together quite a few things there, and the influence of the Sabbateans is something I've been meaning to talk about for several weeks, and I've had all of this information stored and I've just put it together. I hope all this was insightful and helpful, and bringing the past into the present should be enough for people to realise that this has been an ongoing plan, and that ongoing plan is very near to completion, and people are still being led in the wrong directions. Of course, they're falling for the memes that have been given to them. Far right. People are now saying, yes, that is what we are. You never define yourself by the terms of the oppressor. You have to create your own language and your own terms, just as they have done, to control you. This we've talked about on many occasions. This is the sort of thing I've found absolutely fascinating. So I hope you found that useful. Do support the show if you can, and thanks to everybody who has supported us and is currently supporting us. Couldn't do it without you, and the information that gets sent in is absolutely brilliant. We have researchers all over the world now. People are sending me stuff that I wouldn't have come across if I'd have been just searching on the internet myself, because what happens with this stuff, I find, is that one thing and one tangent leads to another. But because of the way the internet is now controlled, things are getting harder and harder to find. So all of the information that is sent in, I'm really grateful for. So do support the show. You can do that by going onto the homepage at wondersontheworld.net. There's Patreon, there's PayPal there, or you can email me for details of how to support the show. And we have quite a few people now putting in $5 a month, which is starting to help to pay for everything. And I want to go from strength to strength, and this is about a mutual trust between myself and the listeners. I think this show has found a unique place, and that is why I still do it. I really wouldn't be doing this if I thought there was no point, but the reactions I've had from the people who listen and the support that I've had over the past several weeks when I've mentioned that we might need a bit of help has been very encouraging indeed.